Anja van Beek, thank you for joining me today, for agreeing to spend some time with me and joining in this client series that we're doing, where we're adding value and assisting businesses, especially their leadership that is now so overwhelmed, them being in the cockpit, so to speak, and they need to provide direction to the staff. They need to maybe change even the value offering to clients, and they need to emerge out of COVID-19 in the second part of 2020. And I know that you provide a lot of guidance and leadership coaching and advice to businesses globally. Talent strategist, I've benefited from your Agile certification, but in your own words, what is it that you do to help companies, to help your clients?
Yeah, good morning and thank you for the invitation. It's a warm welcome here from sunny South Africa. So yeah, in a nutshell, what I do is I partner and support HR and leaders to help them build an environment where their employees can thrive. So my focus is mainly twofold. On the one side, really to have a look at how can one use the Agile principles to build that environment. And secondly, focusing on the individual, where I partner with them and help them from a coaching side to achieve their goals.
Now, I'm sure you've been quite busy engaging with your clients lately, and especially now that things have changed quite a bit. What is it that you've seen over the last couple of weeks? What trends?
Yeah, so I mean, if we just have a look at the start of this decade, it's definitely been a bumpy ride. And one of the trends that you asked about is we've seen for 2020 a focus of a more human-centric approach. And with the COVID-19 pandemic, that has just been amplified and in some situation almost forced upon some of the companies. Now, what we know is that change will not go away. It will only go faster and faster. And that's why it's critical for leaders and their teams to have that adaptive approach towards the future. And what I have seen is that the companies that will thrive are those companies that will become a learning organization, which means that leaders need to learn certain new things and unlearn other things in order to be successful. So, I mean, perhaps for today, I can share 3 focus areas which I think will support leaders moving forward. And the first one is really to jumpstart their culture. Secondly, it's to consider what does a blended workspace mean for them? And then thirdly, what does it mean, or why do we need to embrace an opportunity mindset?
I'm so glad you picked 3 things, Anja, because I think leaders are already so overwhelmed with all of the aspects that they face. I think those are very relevant. So how do leaders jumpstart a culture?
So I think if we talk about culture, it's really looking at the beliefs and the behaviors of the employees. And if we have a look at the last few weeks, what we have seen, it's almost, I mean, with all the Zoom meetings and the interaction where you in your work, actually your home life, and just blending the workspaces together, is that the focus on it is okay to be human is almost like an eye-opener for some people. I mean, if we look at humans, they crave social interactions. And that is why it's critical for leaders when you think of cultures, of your organizational culture, to think of what's the cues that you give your team in order to emphasize the point that we're in this together and we have a future together. So one thing that I usually highlight when you think of culture is to never underestimate the importance of what I call the invisible leader. And the invisible leader links back to the purpose of the organization. And any leadership team need to consider and think of, are their employees connected to their purpose, and are they excited by the purpose? And also perhaps to consider the question, if they willingly, or if they would choose to use their talents and their creativity to work towards the organizational culture. I mean, if we talk about culture, I really would suggest that the leaders become intentional about what it is that they want to create. I mean, if you think of the work environment, what is it that the perhaps new values, new cues, new rituals that you want to introduce? Somebody in my network said that never waste a good crisis. And I think that's exactly what COVID-19 has bring, that it's an opportunity for us to introduce new behaviors. Now, Corinne, I don't know if you remember a few years back, there was this advertisement from, I think it was Volkswagen, where they actually want to test if people will use the escalators or if they can change the behavior and for the individuals to use the stairs. And that was a fun way of them bringing in a piano on the stairs. And as people, you know, walk up the stairs, there's different tones or music sounds playing. And that's a fun way of bringing in changes towards your culture. But what we have seen is in this time, people focus a lot or talk a lot of, let's introduce a culture of innovation because we want our employees to think differently, to be creative. But if we talk about a culture of innovation, I think what's critical for leaders to remember is to build that psychological safety. Because if we want our employees to experiment and learn, they need to feel safe, heard, and respected in order to be willing to experiment and learn, because that's what innovation is all about. Let's try something, let's see if it works, and if it's not working, let's adjust and try again.
I can definitely agree that safety aspect, that sense of belonging in the culture, very important from an employee perspective. So thank you for sharing that. In this blended workspace that is now here to stay, what other aspects does leaders need to consider?
Yeah, so I think first of all, if you think of the blended workspace, we do need to remember that the concept of working from a standard office building will not go away. So I think we first of all need to think of work is something that we do and not necessarily a place that we go to. And if you think of the work environment for the last couple of months, everybody worked virtually. And now suddenly half of the team might be based back at the office. And we do need to remember that that can be a big adjustment for some people. And again, just to be mindful of some people need to ease into the new way of working for them as well. And the reason why I'm highlighting that is it's not only what you do as a leader, it's also important to consider how you're doing these things. But if we think of the blended workspace, few things that comes to mind for me is first of all, the agile mindset. And that's really to remember that experiential and the value of adaptability is there's a lot more emphasis on that than following a process. And that's the first thing that I want us to remember. And then also, I mean, for those employees going back to work, we are very focused on creating that safe environment. And again, I want to highlight, it's not only the safety from a physical way, it's also the psychological way. So in a sense, I think the physical spaces, that might be the easier part because you can have your 2-meter distancing or the people, you know, wearing the mask or washing their hands or taking the temperature, whatever that might mean, and putting in guidance with regards to when we have a meeting, how far we need to sit apart. But I think it's really that psychological thing, safety that leaders need to focus on as well, because we want our employees to speak up. When they see something that's not right, actually to just highlight that, or if they have a concern, to have the ability to raise that. I think when I think of psychological safety, it's also something for leaders to be mindful that the mental well-being is more important than ever before. So if we think of blending workspaces, I always encourage leaders to think of distribute your decision-making power. Remember, more so than ever in the past, it's important to provide power or give the power to the people closest to the problem, and have a look at your processes. There might be some bottlenecks, and that is where you need to actually make some adjustments when you go back to virtual, the blending workspaces. And I think the last thing that I can perhaps mention when you look at blending the work, not the works, the work remotely and work from the office, is actually to ask your employees, what is it that they want? So often as leaders, we imagine that we need to come up with all the solutions, and there's actually so much power in just asking them, so what do you want? How can we support you in this transition?
Yes, and surely because people differ, they respond differently as well. So I like what you're saying there, is that it's not a directive, but it's more getting everybody involved, and everybody is heard in terms of the
Yeah,
process forward.
Yeah, Corinne, and perhaps just to add on to what you say, I mean, one of the agile principles that especially now can be very helpful is that it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. Really, as you've just highlighted, have a look at who's the individual in front of you, what are their circumstances, and what do they need to thrive in future, because it might be different to the person sitting next to them.
Yes, and I know for strong business leaders, the practical aspects are more sometimes the focus. And here, with the human element being raised and amplified, there's so much more to consider. That's so true. So mindset is critical, Anja. But what do you mean by an opportunity mindset? What does that
Yeah.
mean?
Okay. So I think before we have a look at the opportunity mindset, I think, again, for leaders to be very mindful that they need to role model what they want to see. So I think it's critical for them to role model calm, clarity. If they want to, if we talk about the opportunity mindset, to even model that as well. And what I mean by the opportunity mindset is that when we're in a place of uncertainty, we need to remember that any challenge brings opportunity. We just need to be mindful and intentional to look for that. I mean, a lot of the times we use the word post-traumatic stress, and what we have seen is people talking about post-traumatic growth. And I just love the word, because that it almost epitomized that you're looking for the growth in this situation. And what we have found that people or individuals that actually have that mindset of, even though I'm in a situation where I did not wish for this to happen, just think of, all the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, yet they have the ability to say, taken whatever has happened, I can still see that I'm better in some or other way. So it's looking for that benefit that you find from the tragedy or the pandemic, as we have talk about at the moment.
I like that that phrase, and surely there's a lot of creativity amongst people, and that can also come forward in a situation like that.
Yeah, and I think if you think of creativity, so often individuals think, but oh, I'm not creative. And I think it's really just, I almost want to say, just start, just try something and experiment and learn. It does not have to be perfect. Sometimes perfect is our blind spot, because we want everything to, to just be right from the word go. But it's really to say, in the future that's so unknown, how can we experiment and learn and adjust accordingly?
Right. Anja, so much value, so many aspects. Where can people reach you if they want to learn more about the future fit organizations or adaptive leadership? I'm also thinking about your Agile certifications and workshops. Although based in South Africa, they're globally accessible. You guys have virtual channels in place and online facilities.
Yeah, so Corinne, I'm so pleased to let you know that all our workshops has now been done, or is now virtual workshops, and we've converted the training that is not full day training any longer, but it's chunk size about 2.5 hours per session. And depending on what you want to do, you can enroll either for the full course or just the Agile principles, fundamentals as we call them, or perhaps only the Agile leadership section. So there's different options. And as you say, I'm so excited about presenting and facilitating this for a global audience. So I think that's the benefit from my side, is it's not only face-to-face in South Africa anymore, but I can really, any team or any individual that's interested can contact me. So it might be best to look at my website. It's www.anjavanbeek.co.za, or they can just reach me via email, and my email address is hello, HELLO, @anjavanbeek.co.za. And I would love to hear from your clients. They can just pop me a mail, ask a question, and I would be open to answer that.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you for being open to that, and really appreciate your time and all your advice. I know it's years of experience, and just for spending a bit of time with us today. I really appreciate that. Anja, wishing you all of the best. Hope to speak soon.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. Take care, Corinne. Goodbye.